In the cutting-edge environment that makes up the modern medical advancements of today, there are many gray areas about the procedures and principles. We, as the new generation of bioethicists, are called to deal with those gray areas and make them clearer. Today, we will discuss the topic of euthanasia. I'll give you some of its facts, its history, and its modern roles in society. Then you can decide whether or not you support or disapprove of euthanasia. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is euthanasia anyway? Or maybe you already know what it is and you're not wondering. But to keep everyone on the same page here, let me give you a medical definition from the Farlex Medical Dictionary, which says, euthanasia is the act or practice of ending a life of an individual suffering from a terminal illness or an incurable condition, as by lethal injection or the suspension of extraordinary medical treatment. In other words, mercy killing. Now, let's put that definition into layman's terms. Euthanasia basically entails the doctor or someone who's not the patient delivering some kind of lethal injection or lack of medical continuement of curement to the patient if that person, feels pity for them or thinks that ending their life will end their suffering as well. So, now you know what euthanasia means, and now you know its definition and all that, and we're all on the same page. So now we're going to go on to how it works. So, if a person in the hospital is lying sick and a doctor or family member or friend takes pity on that person and their suffering, and they desire to end that person's life in order that he or she may not suffer anymore, this mercy killing is usually accomplished by lethal injection or the suspension of extraordinary medical treatment. The patient now may or may not give consent to this procedure. All right, you know how it works, you know its definition. Let's go on to its history. Well, as you know, there's been talk about the legality and the morality of euthanasia. How long has this discussion been going on, you might ask? Well, this particular debate has been going on for quite some time, 20 centuries actually. It all started with Hippocrates, the father of medicine, and his Hippocratic Oath, which is right here. He said in his Hippocratic Oath, well, actually, he started the Hippocratic Oath, he created it as a moral guideline of sorts for the many physicians and medics to come. And this oath covers every topic, well, most topics, from abortion to conduct around patients, and it even has a certain line that specifies and specifically talks about euthanasia. And this line says, "I will give no deadly medicine to anyone if asked, nor suggest such a counsel." That's pretty clear, right? Well, it must have been really clear because the principle went on without... Well, it must have been very clear because this belief on euthanasia went on for centuries and centuries. Actually, in the 14th through 20th century, the English common law said that the Anglo-American common law tradition will punish or otherwise disapprove of assisted suicide. In the 19th century, U.S. Judge Zephaniah Swift, on his treatise of the laws of Connecticut, stated that if anyone counsels another to commit suicide and the other by reason of the advice kills himself, the advisor is guilty of murder as principle. This is basically saying if a doctor or a friend or loved one suggests and encourages euthanasia to a patient and the patient thus receives euthanasia, the person who suggested it is just as liable and just as guilty of the death of the patient. In 1816, Chief Justice Isaac Parker's charge to the jury in Commonwealth versus Bowen, the case of Commonwealth versus Bowen, stated, "Now, if the murder of oneself is felony, the accessory is equally guilty as if he had aided and abetted in the murder. The consent of a homicide victim is wholly immaterial to the guilt of the person who caused the death." This is basically saying that even if the patient consents to euthanasia, it's still immoral and wrong. In 1920, the book Permitting the Destruction of Life, Unworthy of Life, was published. In 1939, this is a very famous one. In 1939, the Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, implemented mercy killing of newborns and young children in his program called the Action T4, in which he sought to eliminate life unworthy of life, like the book. And later on, Action T4 expanded to children who were mentally retarded and physically deformed, and then expanded even more to all disabled people, adult and children, claiming that if society deems a person unsuitable for life, then they have the right to terminate that person's life. And that concludes my short history of euthanasia. Now, we're going to move on to real-world applications. Real-world applications. Look how nice and tidy that is. Not really. Okay, so you're probably wondering, oh, wait, hold on one second. Back to history for a second. In 1998, sorry about that. In 1998, the state of Oregon legalized assisted suicide. In 2000, the Netherlands legalized euthanasia, the Netherlands right there. And then in 2002, Belgium legalized euthanasia. So pretty advanced development of approval of euthanasia. Back to real-world development and real-world application. So you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with me? I mean, it's a bunch of old dates, a bunch of old people. What do I have to do with any of this? Well, it has a lot to do with us right now, because euthanasia affects any of our friends, families, or loved ones who have ever entered a hospital with a fatal illness. You're talking about Terry Schiavo. You're talking about Karen Weber. These are cases, although not classified under euthanasia, they do arouse some of the same questions, such as who gets to determine who should live and who shouldn't? When is suffering too much to bear? When is a person a burden to society? And why should that person be killed for being a burden to society? Each and every one of us have or will experience hospitalization of a family member or loved one, and several of us will find that that person or loved one has a fatal disease. We will then be presented with the option by the doctor or by another person of euthanasia. Today, euthanasia is very prevalent. It's very advanced. It's becoming prominent in our society. And here are some current event snippets from the news that involve euthanasia. You might recognize some of these, so I won't delve into it too much. According to CatholicNews.com, in Belgium, a law has been passed allowing small children to be euthanized. That news report is very well known, very widespread, and there have been many protesters and many dissenters. Let me put that back to give you a visual. Who have been protesting against this law that in Belgium. Once again, CatholicNews.com, in Quebec, Canada, an end-of-life bill has been introduced to the government, and this bill will permit terminal medical sedation and medical aid in dying if the patient repeatedly asks for it. So basically, it's saying that if a patient wants to be euthanized and they repeatedly ask to be euthanized, in Quebec, Canada, they will be euthanized. All right. So you have the facts, you have the history, you have the current issues. Now let's see what different people have to say about euthanasia. So with euthanasia being such a serious matter, we have many sides. People have taken many sides. Today we'll examine two sides, that of the Catholic Church and that of euthanasia supporters. We'll start with the euthanasia supporters. And if you're looking for more information, by the way, euthanasia.com gives a lot of unbiased, extensive information about the history and facts and such, and that's actually where I got my information for the history of euthanasia. But back to the supporters of euthanasia, I will read to you some excerpts and quotes from an Australian site that supports euthanasia, and it's called ethicalrights.com. You can read along the summary from this, and this, I've observed, really emphasizes the rights of democracy and autonomy. So watch out for those as you read along. John Stuart Mill, in his support of the rights of terminally ill bill in Australia, says, terminally ill patients who desire euthanasia for themselves are not physically harming other people. This bill is consistent with democratic principles. There's that democracy we're talking about. Bob Dent says, what right has anyone, because of their own religious faith to which I do not describe, demand that I must behave according to their rules? That's basically saying, why do I have to follow your own religious beliefs about euthanasia if I don't necessarily agree? In effect, the Euthanasia Laws Act inflicts a form of discrimination on those who are terminally ill. So it's basically saying, by not granting patients the ability to receive euthanization on their request, that is just discrimination. And voluntary euthanasia is morally just precisely because it's voluntary. Once again, another quote from ethicalmorals.com. And basically, it's saying that when the quality of life is more important than the quantity of life, voluntary euthanasia is a good option. Once again, this is ethical rights quotes, and it's basically saying that voluntary euthanasia is moral and humane because it is what the individual wants and it accords with common sense. All right, now you've gotten the supporting side. Now we will look at the dissenting side, which is the Catholic Church. And it looks at euthanasia in the principles of respect for life and respect for common good. So we're going to quickly brisk over that. I quoted the Catechism of the Catholic Church on that one, and you can follow along in the summary as I read. The CCC verses 227 to 2291. Whatever it motivates and means, direct euthanasia consists in putting an end to lives of the handicapped, sick, or dying persons. It is morally unacceptable. Thus, an act or omission of which, of itself, or by intention, causes death in order to eliminate suffering, constitutes a murder gravely contrary to the dignity of the human person and respect due to living God, his creator. Discontinuing medical procedures that are burdensome, dangerous, or extraordinary, or disappropriate to the expected outcome can be legitimate. It is the refusal of overzealous treatment. It's basically saying if the treatment becomes dangerous and burdensome and just too unwarranted, it can be ended and the act won't be considered as murder because the procedures have become overzealous. Everyone is responsible for his life before God. This is verse 2280. Everyone is responsible for his life before God, who has given it to him. It is God who remains the sovereign master of life. We are obliged to accept life gratefully and preserve it for his honor and for the salvation of our souls. We are stewards, not owners, of the life God has entrusted to us. So, once again, euthanasia is very prevalent in our society today, and whether you dissent or support it, you now have some more of that information there. more on the Catholic Church's view of euthanasia. Anyone who uses the power of his disposal, which is scandal, so anyone who convinces another to commit euthanasia, leads them to do wrong and becomes guilty of the scandal and is responsible for the evil that has directly or indirectly been encouraged. So it's basically saying if a doctor or loved one or a friend encourages a patient to receive euthanasia, they are equally as guilty, which reminds me of the 19th century legal cases